All right, so thank you everybody for coming in. I hope your morning has started really well. We're going to start with some introductions. So the first person, our first guest, is Alain-Philippe Durand, who is the Dean of the College of Humanities at the University of Arizona, which is the college where Circle, who is hosting this conference, is housed, and he'd like to say a few words. Evi?
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome. I hope that you are going to have a great, beautiful day, as we like to have them here in Tucson. If it's your first time in Tucson, the weather is always gorgeous like that. Sometimes it's even a little warmer. It's been a little colder than usual lately, but so anyway, it is really my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the 6th International Conference on the Development and Assessment of Intercultural Competence. The focus this year is on intercultural competence and mobility, virtual and physical. This conference, as you know, is organized by Circle, which stands for the Center for Educational Resources in Culture, Language and Literacy, and co-organized by SLAT, the Second Language Acquisition and Teaching Program at the University of Arizona. Circle is a Title VI center in the College of Humanities, as you just heard, and I would really like to take this opportunity to thank Circle's co-directors, Béatrice Dupuis and Chantel Warner, as well as Associate Director Kate McKay, for all the work that running and securing funds for such a prestigious center and conference represents. Yes. I know, in fact, that the Circle's team is already busy working on a proposal for what we all hope will be a new Language Resource Center grant for the next 4 years. And if we are successful, we hope to hold the next ICC conference here in 2020 and to welcome you back in Tucson. In the meantime, I am told that for this 2018 edition, we have registrants from across all over the United States, but there are also another 20 countries represented in the current registration list from all over the world. Some of these participants are here in Tucson for the conference, but others are accessing the conference through the live stream. I guess we are live right now from all around the world, so that's pretty cool. Hello. The University of Arizona's president, Robert Robbins, as well as recent literature and data, such as, for example, the World Economic Forum's The Future of Jobs, Employment, Skills, and Workforce for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, NACE's Job Outlook 2017, the Qatar Foundation International, books by Jeff Salingo, There is Life After College, or Scott Hartley's book, The Fuzzy and the Techie, Why the Liberal Arts Will Rule the Digital World, have all expressed that the skills we teach in the humanities, such as intercultural competence, leadership, adaptability, problem solving, critical thinking, or collaboration, are the most in demand in the global workforce today. This is why our disciplines must be at the forefront of that fourth industrial revolution. For example, among many other initiatives, at the University of Arizona, the College of Humanities is partnering with the Office of Global Initiatives to bring to the College of Humanities 2 new tenure stream assistant professors with expertise in intercultural competence. We are about to complete the search that is going on. So this conference, I believe, is very timely indeed. Thank you again for being here, and my best wishes for another successful conference.
So before introducing our speaker, I'd like to make 2 announcements. The first one you can see is on this slide. We are actually busy preparing for this conference in October this year, And the call for papers is soon to be ready, so just keep an eye out. We wanted to advertise it here today just because of the relationship, the close connection between this conference and the theme that we have running throughout this weekend. Also, I would like to remind you that in your app, you have the opportunity to like the sessions that you attend, as well as rate the session and provide feedback to the speakers. It's also really important for us to secure more funding through our grantors. So please take the time to do that when you are done with attending a session. All right, so it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Robert O'Dowd. Robert is Associate Professor of Applied Linguistics at the University of León in Spain. He has worked at universities in Ireland, Germany, and Spain, and has published widely on the application of collaborative online learning in university education. And actually, I found out that in a recent interview with FLT Mag, he discussed the first virtual exchange that he carried out in 1999 between English learners in Spain and students in the United States. Virtual exchanges and intercultural competence have been the focus of his work since. His most recent publication is a co-edited volume with Tim Lewis Online Intercultural Exchange Policy, Pedagogy, Practice by Routledge. He recently coordinated Intent, which is an award-winning project financed by the European Commission aimed at promoting virtual exchange in European higher education, and he's currently president of Uni Collaboration, an academic organization for telecollaboration and virtual exchange. He's also active in English medium instruction, EMI, in university education, and has designed the MEI training and certification program at his home university, and has taught various EMI training programs in universities in Spain, Italy, and Austria. He has a presence on academia.edu where you can find his publications. You could also follow him on Twitter, where he is really active. So the title of his talk is Moving from Intercultural Contact to Intercultural Learning in Virtual Exchange. Please help me give a warm welcome to Robert O'Dowd.
Okay. Well, they're setting up my PowerPoint for me. Let's just make sure this works first. Yeah, it does. I have to admit I have a problem. And you guys are the problem, basically. I have lots of problems, but we're just going to talk about this one, right? You guys are a problem because in this audience today, we have people that have vast experience in virtual exchange, telecollaboration, that they're practitioners, they're researchers. The stuff that I would be quoting in my own work, you know, is the people in this audience. Yet, also in this audience, there's a bunch of people who probably have very vague ideas of what virtual exchange is, and that's maybe one of the reasons why you've come to this conference. Okay? So what I'm going to ask to do is basically, especially for the first 10 or 15 minutes, the people that know all about this, you can now tune out. You can put on your headphones. You can start using WhatsApp or do whatever. You talk among yourselves quietly. Try not to annoy the rest of them. And so I'm going to go quickly through a very basic introduction to what we're talking about. Okay? And then I'll give you a shout and you can tune back in later on. Okay? Is that okay? All right. First of all, to start, having a look at the title of this conference. Right? This conference for me is the dream conference. It's like the perfect conference. Because, okay, so I research virtual exchange, and that's what I've been doing for many years. But the reason why I'm here today, the reason I am who I am, the reason why I work in what I work in, is because of physical mobility, study abroad. There was like a before and an after in my life of when I went abroad for the first time to study. Has that happened to many people here too? That this has like been, you know, a changing moment, right? And this is, I can definitely remember, you know, coming back from France where I did my first Erasmus, and from then on I knew what I wanted to do more or less. You know, more or less at the back of my mind, I wanted to do. And you know, Erasmus, in Europe we talk about Erasmus, meaning student mobility. Erasmus has been one of the few European projects that has been immensely successful. immensely. They say that, you know, contributing to the idea of, you know, what is that people feeling European, you know, Erasmus has been the main tool for achieving that, you know, and it's so important. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, okay, so I'm Irish, but I live in Spain, so I follow the news in both countries. A few weeks ago in Ireland, a politician died. Peter Sutherland was his name. And Peter Sutherland, and when I read his obituary, said he was the father of Erasmus in Ireland. So he would be the politician that helped bring Erasmus into Ireland. And the same week in Spain, Manuel Maurín, I think his name was a Spanish politician, also died. And he too was El Padre de Erasmus. He was like the man, and he too, it's just a coincidence, a sad coincidence, obviously. But, you know, I thought, you know, Erasmus and physical mobility are so, you know, they're so important to us, and especially to people, everybody here, that's our baseline, isn't it? You know, and imagine if there's Europeans here, you will be familiar with this. But in Europe, they've set a high standard here. They said by 2020, they want to have 20% of all students having had some kind of physical mobility. Okay, 2020, all right? What is the current rate of student mobility in Europe? Anybody like to guess, percentage-wise? 5%. Any higher or lower? 12%? 16%. Very positive, Sabine, very positive. What is the current rate of student mobility in the USA? 6? 3? 2 people? No, they're 2%. Well, okay, these are the statistics that I was able to come up with. In Europe, the average is 5%. Whoever the lady said that over there, well done. Yeah. So this is 5%. These are all the different countries. This magnificent country here is Luxembourg. Okay, so 20 people from Luxembourg have done student. All right. All right. And in the United States, this is, I wrote to a couple of people because I didn't believe this. And I said, is this like an accurate statistic? This Open Doors is apparently where you check these statistics in the States. And 10% of all US undergraduates will study abroad. Okay? So that's okay. Now that again is, okay, positive. However, and there's a big however here, and maybe it's jumping into your minds as well. If study abroad is so important, okay, well then what happens? Okay, I'll come to that in a second. What happens to the 80% or the 90% that don't do it? Okay, now we have to be fair and remember, of course, that just going abroad, of course, isn't the thing. You know, I was in a workshop yesterday where this was discussed in detail, right? Sarah Richardson, this is a really interesting book because she's kind of critical of physical mobility. She doesn't believe in it. She doesn't think it's like the panacea for everything. And she says, the espoused benefits from physical mobility do not derive from the act of crossing borders. Okay? So simply going abroad isn't the educational outcome of it, right? It depends on 2 other factors. Okay? Firstly, the encounters the students have, so who they meet, who they interact with, okay? Whether they lock themselves in their room with their mobiles and just Skype with their friends all the year, which is very often maybe what happens nowadays. And secondly, the influence of their psychological makeup on how they respond to these encounters. So whether they are open and willing to learn from these encounters. Okay, so I think this is really important about physical mobility. But anyway, so the question is, what about the large majority of our students that will never engage in physical mobility programs? And finally, in Europe, the European Commission and everybody that supports these type of initiatives is waking up to this, right? They're saying internationalization should ensure that the large majority of learners who are not mobile are nonetheless able to acquire the international skills required in a globalized world. So the 80%, the 90% that will never go abroad, what do we do with them? How do we get them ready for this international globalized world that they're going to be living in? Okay? And that's why I imagine in the States this is true, but in Europe everybody's talking about internationalization at home. Okay? Internationalizing campuses. Giving students international experiences in their local classrooms and their local universities. And internationalization of the curriculum as well, which is a related area. Okay? And what myself and my friends and my colleagues have been arguing for years is that a basic element of internationalization at home is, or should be, this thing: telecollaboration or virtual exchange. Okay, now, very quick definition. Engaging groups of students in online intercultural interaction and collaboration with students from other cultural contexts as an integrated part of coursework and under the guidance of educators and facilitators. Now, I imagine most of you, even those that are not familiar with this, you would have worked out the first two bits yourselves, okay? It's putting my class into contact with another class, right? But I think we really have to underline this part. Integrated part of coursework, so they get recognition for the study and what they do, and under the guidance of educators and facilitators. And I'm going to talk more about that later on, because very often teachers think that all this is about is putting your students together, standing back and watching them learn, right? And it doesn't work like that, okay, as we will see, right? Okay, how many of the people here today have organized virtual exchanges in their classes? Hands, just give me a look at that. Look at that. Almost half of you, I'd say. Almost half of you have done this, all right? So I'm speaking to the converted in many cases. That's all right. Okay, right. Okay, this isn't coming out the way it was. The terms, a big quick mention of terminology, okay? Virtual exchange is one way of describing this. But you have probably heard of online intercultural exchange. You've probably heard of e-tandem or tele-tandem, which is an approach that's been used in Brazil a lot now. If you come from the area of business studies, they talk about global virtual teams, right? Telecollaboration is what we use in the foreign language education, right? And there's another very common one coming out of the SUNY network of universities in the States, COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning, okay? Have you heard of any other names and terms for this? You guys this morning were talking about virtual international exchange, right? Okay. If you go to Coventry University, where in the UK, there's a big network of OIL, Online Intercultural International Learning, I think. Okay. So it goes on and on. Okay. So why virtual exchange? Well, look, virtual exchange, I think, is gradually becoming an umbrella term to talk about it. Now, each of these will have different emphasis, different, like I said, different curricula and stuff like that. But virtual exchange, I think, is a pretty simple term that covers more or less everything, okay? And most importantly, the people that, with the money, the people that are supporting us, for example, in Europe, the European Commission, they're now talking about Erasmus Plus virtual exchange, EVE, okay? So once you know, in Europe at least, once the people that fund projects and that fund initiatives, once they start talking about something, everybody else eventually adapts it, okay? And in the United States as well, you've got lots of organizations that come together under the title Virtual Exchange Coalition, the Virtual Exchange Coalition, okay? People could talk for hours and debate about which is nicer, which is more common and stuff like that. Let's not waste too much time on it, okay? As long as we know what we're talking about, you know, I think let's just have one general term and let's get on with it, okay? Now, so far, what we have in this area is you know, quite an established research base. There's lots and lots of people doing research in this area, and they're publishing about it, okay? There's lots of books, there's special editions of journals coming out. And what we have now is an organization called Uni Collaboration, which didn't exist before. Before there was like never one hub where, you know, lecturers and practitioners and researchers could come together to talk about this. There are always like special interest groups in bigger organizations. But in unicollaboration.eu, you have a platform where if you're a teacher and you say in the university, and I'm looking for a partner class in Germany for my course next year. You go there, you can post it, say I'm looking for a teacher or I'm looking for a partner, or you can look for, there's tasks and examples of projects and stuff like that. And here, unicollaboration.org is an academic organization. We're having a conference in Krakow in Poland in April, and there's lots of stuff going on there too, okay? So, and we've also actually become part of a big macro-European tender that came out called EVE, and well, Sarah will talk in her presentation maybe more about that. Okay, now one good thing about telecollaboration research is that we're very critical of our own achievements. We're very quick to admit that our exchanges don't always work out the way we planned, that they could be improved and stuff like that. It's a very action research approach, Okay, and this is, I think, a good thing, because what you don't want is to be reading, oh, this is wonderful, this is great, all my students learned everything, and everything was perfect, and then when you do it, it doesn't work out like that, and you're saying, what am I doing wrong? So it's good that publishing takes a critical approach. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do now for the rest of my talk is give you examples of two practical practical examples of virtual exchanges and how they work, right? And I'm going to talk about some of the criticisms, because more and more often now, what you're finding is people looking at virtual exchange from the outside and pointing out weaknesses. And I think that's, for us, the people that do it, very useful. Because we believe so much in what we're doing, sometimes we miss the obvious, right? So it's good to read people that are critical of it and say, okay, well, now what can we learn from it, okay? I'm going to show you some criticisms, but that doesn't mean that I agree with them, but I think that they can be useful for us to improve our work and the way we do it, okay? So that's basically what I'm going to try to do. Okay, first of all, to start off, I did recently two kind of review articles, okay, looking at the type of research that's going on and stuff like that. And what comes out of the literature is that the large majority of virtual exchanges in foreign language education are bilingual exchanges. Spanish learners of English working with English learners of Spanish. Okay, no surprises there. Right, that's fair enough. Okay. Most of them as well actually follow this e-tandem model, which I'm going to explain to you in a couple of minutes, those of you that aren't familiar with it, what's it about, okay? And then another one, then this is closely followed by intercultural telecollaborative models, like Cultura that Sabine Lavette and her colleagues were talking about yesterday in their workshop. Okay, again, we'll see more about that in a minute. Most virtual exchange research studies are based on learning outcomes of one cohort of students over one semester. So if your typical average research article is researchers doing one exchange over one semester and then analysing the learning outcomes, what students learned and stuff like that. Okay? And I think what we need, one of the things that we need to be doing, right, is look for learning outcomes that emerge from different cohorts of students doing the same type of exchange. So we can see kind of tendencies, trends emerging. If you do an e-tandem exchange, or if you do this type of model of virtual exchange, then these are the general trends that will emerge from it. All right? And that's what I try to do. Okay? These are students at my university in León, in Spain. Okay? And with this group of students, these guys here, they're students of future teachers of primary education. Okay? And for the past 1, 2, 3 years, I did with this large group an e-tandem exchange, okay, with partners at the University of Central Missouri and with students of Spanish at the University of Limerick. Okay, so my students are studying English, okay, they want to be English teachers, they're English as a foreign language, and they're working with students in Missouri and in Limerick and Ireland in English and Spanish. Okay, so the e-tandem model basically means is that you match two native speakers and you get them to work together on their own on different tasks. Okay, that's the idea behind the e-tandem. All right. Partners provide feedback on the content and on the foreign language performance of their partners. Okay, as you'll see in a minute, students would write a message. They'll try to write these messages or speak in the foreign language, and their partner's job is to give them feedback, correct them, and help them improve the foreign language. Okay. All right. And the teacher's role in this model is normally quite limited. The teachers give out the tasks, say, okay, this week or this month you guys have to do this together, and then you evaluate, maybe students will hand in a portfolio at the end of the exchange and you evaluate that, all right? So it's not integrated into the class, right? Now, here's a very quick example of what an email in an e-tandem exchange would look like, okay? This is a girl from Missouri, okay, writing to our partners in Spain, okay, and she goes, hey Pablo, it was great to receive your letter. I was so happy to see you responded to my questions. Thank you. Your response is very informative. It's all very friendly, all right. One of the criticisms is very often positioned as friends working together, all right. She goes on, your English is very good. There are only a few suggestions that I have to correct. Some of your sentences are too long and would make more sense if you separated them into 2 or more 3 sentences instead. For example, my parents are not divorced in Spain. There are very few cases of divorced. Could be rewritten as, my parents are not divorced, stop. In Spain, there are very few cases of divorce. Okay, so, providing feedback on the language. And what does she do next? She goes, okay, now it's my turn. And she writes the second part of her message in Spanish. And there she's going to make lots of mistakes, as the Spanish speakers will see. And then Pablo will write back to her and say, oh, your Spanish is wonderful, but you don't say this, you say that, etc. Okay, no, all right, okay, there you go. Okay. Also in eTandem, they do lots of things like this. They nowadays, okay, not only by email, but they're also, of course, using other multimodal tools to make presentations to each other and to work together. Okay, they, the Americans are like are asked to give definitions of what does being American mean, or what does being a Spaniard mean, right? So the Americans make these lovely presentations telling about the melting pot and stuff like that. Okay, but they also show their family and they try out their Spanish in that way. And then the Spanish, of course, make their blogs and they talk about Semana Santa, which is Easter time and blah, blah, okay, all this kind of stuff. All right, so you get the idea. Now, have a look at, they also, of course, yes, this as well, they also, not only by writing emails, but making Google Docs together, they provide feedback. They provide feedback. This is the original text by the girl in Missouri, and this is her partner then providing feedback on it. Okay, pretty basic, obvious stuff for most of you. Okay, now, but this is where it gets interesting. The interaction between the students, if I look at this over 3 years, and I take a look at all the different interactions from all of these students, certain things start to come up, okay, if you take a grounded approach to this, right? First of all, that the interaction is characterized by positive, friendly relationships, okay? The student from Missouri says, my vision of Spain is beautiful, of course, with very fashionable people in the streets and tons of good food. I imagine spending lots of time outside enjoying the scenery and exploring new territories. Okay, and look at the way she corrects. You write really well. However, try to say, I would like for you to write me instead of I would like that you write me, and things like that. So very positive, friendly things, right? Now have a look. And when you ask the Spanish students, what did you learn from the experience? Okay. So many of them over the 3 years give the same type of answers. This activity has meant more to me than just correcting mistakes. It has been an activity to practice English in a friendly way. Friendly, right? Notice this. With confidence and freedom. There are many people in Spain who don't get on in English and they feel ashamed to talk, so they prefer not talking. But that's why I like this activity so much, because everyone in class could practice English as they wanted. Okay? So for many students, this is the first time in their lives that they're actually talking to real people, and they get to see that they can communicate in a foreign language. Because I don't know what happens in the States, but still in Spain, in secondary school, for example, foreign language education is very much grammar and vocabulary driven. Right? So the kids never really get a feeling of that they're able to communicate. This is for the first time in their lives, their first chance to say, my God, I can actually talk to somebody in this language. Right? Many of them mention this. They mention, of course, the individual vocabulary that they find and stuff like that. Okay, so no surprises there. But look at this. See if this is familiar to you. Okay, they say when they're asked about cultural difference. So, what did you learn about any cultural differences between the Spanish and the Americans? I will say that I liked the exchange very much, and that American students looked like very nice people. Congratulations. I talked to them about my city and about theirs, and it was nice to see that there are little differences, but not as much as I thought. Okay? And another one. It has been such an exciting experience because we have learned English while we have known a different culture. To mind, we aren't too different. Both of us like sports, music, and spending time with our friends. Now, this great workshop that we had yesterday, all about these assessment tools, right? I bet you if you see this, the word minimalization, I think, is the term, right, that we should be talking about here. This is people denying difference. Deep down, we're all the same, right? And this happens a lot in eTandem. I found that in the eTandem exchanges that we do, this happens an awful lot, okay? Claire Cramsh and Paige Ware describe this as the illusion of commonality. So I think it's a lovely phrase, a lovely way of expressing it. The illusion of commonality. It's saying, let's pretend there's no difference between us, we're friends, and that's how it works out, okay? And Claire Cramsh is, I think, quite critical of this, okay? Look what she says here. Whereas communicative language teaching used to mean personal engagement with interlocutors from different cultures in negotiation of difference through global information technologies, it has become a means of making contact and staying in touch by surfing diversity, not engaging with difference. And my experience is that in eTandem exchanges, when you let students on their own, more or less, to do this thing, that's what will happen. They will avoid problems. They will avoid negotiating difference, and they will just play along, do the tasks, but never really get stuck into what's really happening, what the cultural differences that are there, right? And this is a book that, if you're interested in a good critique of telecollaboration, this one by Hannah and Denoy, or Denu, I'm not too sure. Denui, okay. What are the underlying tenets of telecollaborative practice? She says, or they say, the success of telecollaboration in e-tandem learning tends to rely on the quality of the relationship. Do you notice earlier all those lovely, my friend, this friendly way, and this very nice friendly interaction, okay? It is an exchange between a pair of individuals already positioned as friends. Okay, now, and what they do is they question this, to say this is one type of genre, one type of relationship, but our students need to be prepared for other types of intercultural experiences. And what they do in that book is they talk about sending their students into discussion forums that belong to newspapers, and actually interacting with native speakers, and then getting taken to pieces by native speakers for not behaving the right way and not adapting to the genre. Okay, so the first critique, I suppose, is that online exchanges can be very limited in their genre, and they can force people almost to adopt this friendly self-presentation type of approach to things that isn't healthy. Okay, or not. Well, whether it's healthy or not, you can debate it. But it's It's only one thing that we should be preparing our students to do. Okay, now. Student-to-student exchanges also have other problems too, right? I want you to have a look at this email, right? This is from a German student. This comes from an earlier exchange. A German student writing to her partner in Ireland, in Trinity College in Ireland, and this is our first mail, right? Have a look at this. Hello, how are you? I study English and history and I want to become a teacher. This term we do some cultural studies concerning Ireland. I'm very interested in it because I actually do not know much about it. Now I would like to ask you some questions. Do you live in Northern or Southern Ireland? How many people live in your town? Are you Catholic or Protestant? I have heard that regular church-going declines more and more in your country. Is it true? What are you doing in your free time? Do you have to go to pubs? What do you think about Germans? Irish people have the reputation of being very indirect and polite in their speaking style. I have read that there was enormous economic change in Ireland. Have you or your parents experienced the social and economic change in the past 20 years? Wait for it. That's all for now. That's all for now. Okay. I refuse to fall into the trap of commenting on German stereotypes and German interactive stereotypes. Right? But so why do I show you this? There's this awful term. I'm sorry, but I can't stand it. Digital natives. Okay, Mark Prensky and all of this, and I think he says now that it was misinterpreted, and you're probably aware of this debate. But we have to be really careful, because our students, even though they are belonging to this digital generation, okay, that doesn't mean that they are able to interact and behave online in academic contexts. Like, this is an academic activity that we're asking to do. It doesn't come naturally to them, the same way it doesn't come naturally to any of us. This is like learned behavior. And this is where the teachers, us, that's our job. That's why we won't be replaced by robots that just match our students with students in other countries. Because it's the teacher's job to say, look, you can't send a message like this to somebody. How would you feel? How is your partner going to react to this and stuff like that? And that's where our job is going to come in. And I have one more example of that, okay? Don't take this too personally now, okay? This is at the end of the Missouri exchange this year. And one of my students writes, one of the big differences between us and them was that sometimes they seemed to treat us as if we were from a poor, undeveloped country, or where there is no justice, making us see all the time that the best country in the world was theirs, so the USA, and ours did not have all the good things that supposedly their country has. Now wait for it. From my point of view, it's funny that a country ruled by a man like Trump can say that they are neither racist nor homophobic. That's an irony, okay? This is kind of sad, okay? When I get this in a portfolio at the end, I feel sad. I think something's going wrong here. Because what is happening here is this student is getting all of these messages from Americans talking about, and you know, the American discourse of the students, the American students' discourse is all about, you know, Americans believe in freedom. You know, they talk about the principles that underline American democracy and stuff like that. And that, by this Spanish student, was interpreted as, you know, we are superior, we know democracy, you don't, kind of thing. We know what being free is, you don't. That's the way he interpreted it. So very often when you let students alone to interpret and work out these things on their own, this is what can happen. This wouldn't go wrong, okay? So this is why I think it's so important to, you know, integrate So bringing students into contact with international partners in virtual exchange is not enough. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay, it's not enough to put them together. And very often, I'm afraid that's what teachers do. They work so hard to find their partnerships, to set up their tools, to write the tasks. But what they forget to do, or what they don't spend enough time doing, is talking about the in-class interaction that needs to go around about these exchanges. Okay, and this is another book where they were very, very critical of telecollaborative learning. But it's a good book. It's well worth reading, by Lidicott and Scarino. They talk about a long range, a wide range of telecollaborative studies, and they say that in each instance discussed above, interaction using a social technology has not necessarily resulted in intercultural learning. The tasks involve students in exchanges across cultures, but the intercultural learning was supposed to happen as an automatic result of communication or engagement with others. And they, of course, say it doesn't work like that, right? The problem is that exposure to interaction of itself does not necessarily equate with intercultural learning. Okay, contact hypothesis. Okay, Allports and all of that. Okay, simply bringing people into contact together is not enough. Okay, but there's a certain amount of that maybe happening in telecollaborative studies. To be able to contribute to learning, the interaction must first become available in some way for students to reflect on and interpret. But that is happening. That is happening. There are very good examples of what Julie Bells used to call the alternation of internet-mediated intercultural sessions with face-to-face intercultural sessions. So what teachers are doing is they are preparing their students in class before they actually engage online, okay, linguistically, technologically, interculturally. They do their online exchange, their online interaction with the students, and then the next day or the next week, in class, there's reflection on the learning, and students have to bring in their what they've written or what they've discussed, and they have to talk this through with their teachers, okay? And there's lots of lovely examples of that, right? Cunningham and Viakina, teachers transcribe and code extracts of students' telecollaborative video conferences and then review these transcripts with their students. Rick Kern, who was mentioned earlier today, he talks about la salle de rétrospection, which is what students do is they do video conferencing, and then they are shown recordings of the video conference, and then they are guided through like an analysis of it, okay? And Paige Ware, she does something that I think all of us should be doing in these exchanges, which is basically she shows her students good examples of online interaction and examples of failed online interaction, and helps the students to develop strategies about how to do these things. Okay, so there are lots of examples of this. So maybe Lidicott and Scarino are a bit hard by saying, this doesn't happen ever. It does happen. But the problem is, in our articles, in our research, people don't talk about very often what happens in the class. Okay, they're talking about the online stuff, but they don't talk about what happens in the class, right? Okay, now, those of you that are familiar with physical mobility, this is not news for you either, right? Because, there's more and more interest. This is a book that just came out last year by Jane Jackson and Suzanne Oguru, called Intercultural Interventions and Study Abroad. Research-driven, theory-based intercultural interventions in all phases of study abroad. Pre-sojourn, sojourn and post-sojourn. So getting students ready for going abroad while they're away, like we saw in that great presentation this morning about mentoring students while they are on abroad by video conference, okay, and stuff like this. So I think what you'll notice if you start reading about telecollaborative research, about virtual exchanges, is that an awful lot of the findings of physical mobility and the way physical mobility is used, are also valid in online exchange as well, okay? So I did these e-telling exchanges, but I've also done, for 3 years, intercultural telecollaboration with 3 sets of students that are studying tourism in my university, with students from Princeton and students of Central Missouri as well. And just to show you an example of what intercultural telecollaboration looks like, this is these famous Cultura exchanges, Cultura questionnaires that Sabine Levet and her colleagues have worked on. So very quickly, to explain how these work, students are given keywords like religion, God, homosexual marriage, bullfighting, whatever it is, and they have to write down 3 words in their own language that come to their mind when they hear this. Okay? So, for example, when we give the students in the States, the United States of America, what comes to your mind? Here are the answers in Spanish from my students, and here are the American answers. Okay? So look at this: liberty, freedom, diversity. Statue of Liberty, melting pot, freedom. Okay, diversity, freedom. You see all this aspirational stuff. And for those of you that don't speak Spanish, or for those of you who do, can have some fun. Okay, Trump. Okay, let's get over that. But then, perritos calientes, so hot dogs. Obesidad, obesity. Comida basura, fast food. Hamburguesas. Fat food. I think he meant fast food, not fat food. Okay. All right. So what you do it then is, of course, you can either print this out or you bring it into class and you sit down with your students and you get them to say, no, why, what differences do you notice? Where is it coming from? And then once you've had these discussions with your students, they go online and they start talking about them, right? And here's just to show you the value of these exchanges. I think this is a really good approach. The value of it. Here's just one example. This is between León and Princeton, okay? Most of the words used to describe the United States are fast food, Obama in those days, okay, and patriotism. Are you surprised with our answers? And she kind of sits back, let's see what the Americans say to this, right? And the Princeton guy says, well, hi, I'm particularly interested in the theme of fast food. This past summer, I visited Spain, I recognized how many fast food chains exist in Spain, such as Burger King and McDonald's. From my experience with friends, I had heard of students who eat fast food quite regularly, and they were not US citizens. So this lovely, polite person from Princeton is saying, how can you talk about fast food first when in Spain you eat lots of junk as well? Okay? But, and this is what I love about it, shows you the value of these exchanges. Look at this from another student from Princeton. I think that perhaps the most important factor contributing to the national problem of obesity and the proliferation of fast food is the steep cost of healthy food, which might not be immediately apparent. America's reputation of prosperity might hide the hundreds of millions of Americans that cannot afford fresh fruit and vegetables. For many, fast food is the only economically viable option. This is brilliant for my guys in Spain, because you don't read about this stuff in textbooks, you know what I mean? And this is like a peer in America explaining to them, hang on, the idea of Americans eating fast food, let's look at underneath that a little bit, So this is the value of these, for me, this type of exchanges. All right. Okay, and you ask, and again, what did you learn from experience? And I've looked again for the 3 years of trends that are emerging from the students' experiences. And these are some representative examples. I think that a lot of foreigners have a mistaken vision of Spain. They think our country is all fiestas, bulls, and alcohol. For that reason, I love teaching the American students that Spain is much more than all of these things. So in Telecall Aberration, virtual exchange provides students with agency. They get this feeling of that I'm able to change the image of my country or the image of myself in some way, that I'm able to contribute to this. Another thing is this is very interesting. They asked us about how many of the refugees from Syria had been allowed to Spain. And I had no idea. I had to look on the internet to see what the situation was. It was shocking. The Spanish government haven't attended to their responsibilities in this area at all. And this is a lovely example of what they call distancing. Okay? Distancing is, because you're interacting with foreigners or people from another context, they ask you questions and they make you think about your own culture from a different perspective. Okay? So this is making people more aware. Right? Cummins and Sayers called this many years ago distancing. The increased awareness of the realities of one's own community as a result of the need to describe these realities to questions from distant peers. So because these people are being asked these questions, they're being made to think about their home culture in different ways, or more realistically maybe. Okay. Now, so you've noticed so far that all of these exchanges have been bicultural, bilingual. Okay? And there's, I think, a growing question mark over, is this the best way to go? All right? Now, I suppose if you're a German teacher in the United States or a Spanish teacher in the United States, you're going, well, I want to use this for my students to learn Spanish. But, right, there are certain limitations of this bilingual, bicultural model that I'm kind of worried about, that worries me more and more, even though I do it, as you see, I'm doing it all the time, right? First of all, it positions students as ambassadors and experts of their own language and culture. You're forcing students to put on this cap of, I am a Spanish person, talking in the name of Spain to an American. Or I'm an American talking in the name of the United States, saying, in Spain we do this, in America we do this. We're pushing them, even though we want to move away from stereotypes, we're pushing them very often to generalize these things, right? And because the topic of our conversations, as you have seen, is culture in general, It's like, you know, we're talking so much about culture, and that it tends to, there's a tendency to overgeneralize because of this, right? So, are we preparing our students for the type of online intercultural tasks and encounters which they will have in the future? Okay. Now, you guys will have to think about your own students and how they're going to end up using online technologies and the type of intercultural encounters they will have when they leave school or when they leave your classes. Okay. But more and more, I'm thinking about mine, and my students are not going to be engaging in bilingual online interaction. What my students are going to be doing is writing in English as a lingua franca to Poles, Germans, Russians, Chinese. You know, this is the world we're going into, all right? And there's another issue about this as well, about these exchanges. They often limit students to the role of observers and collectors of information. They observe, they compare, they analyze, but there is no suggestion that criticality should lead to action in the learner's world or communities. Okay, this comes from my friend here, Manuela, and her colleagues, Michael Byram, and Nguluba and we. And I mean, this is interesting here. Until now, all the examples you've seen, students are going, what do you do? Well, in Spain we do this. You compare, you contrast, but there's no action, right? And more now in Europe, we are beginning to, well, Europe and I imagine in the States as well, we're beginning to look at the whole idea of citizenship education and moving citizenship education into foreign language teaching and learning, all right? So Betty Leask has written a very interesting book, Internationalizing the Curriculum, and she says that she wants calls on educators to focus on students as current and future contributors to global society, rather than passive observers or commentators with little or no responsibility for the creation or solution of world problems. So we're trying to make students a little bit more critical and involve them in action in some way, right? Now you start thinking to yourself, hang on now, I'm in a language class. What action am I going to involve my students in, right? This magnificent book by Michael Byram, okay, when he talks about intercultural citizenship, he breaks down what can happen in classrooms into different categories, okay, of acting interculturally. And he describes the first two as pre-political, okay, which basically means learners engage with others and reflect critically on their own assumptions and those of the others. That's what normally happens in online exchanges. Our students engage together and then they sit back and think, okay, what did I learn from that, okay? Right? Or students engage with others, reflect critically and propose or imagine possible alternatives and changes. But all of this is what might happen in the future. It's all conjecture, okay? And most telecollaborative exchanges stay at this level, okay? However, he says that we should go further. I think that's what he's saying, that we should be trying to get to these levels, okay? What are these levels? Learners engage with others, seeking their perspective, propose change, and take action to instigate change in their own society. So we're getting learners now to get involved and to actually do stuff in their society or in the world in general to make the world, and it sounds like a bad Coke commercial, I realize it, but to make the world a slightly better place, okay? Learners create with others a transnational community, propose and instigate change in their respective societies, okay? Or as a transnational community, learners from two or more societies identify an issue that they act upon as a transnational group. So what we're trying to do is get our students to stop thinking about culture and saying, okay, the Spanish do it this way, the Americans do it this way, and this kind of cultural navel-gazing a little, and start getting them to work as international teams to work together to achieve stuff. And when they work together to achieve stuff, they will learn about cultural difference, but they won't be worried so much about what is Spanish and what is American. Okay, it's more a little bit, they become a more nuanced view of cultural difference per se. Okay, is what Rick Kern would describe this as, I think. And there's a lot of work coming out about this all over the globe at the moment. So this is Michael Byram's book about it, but this I think is a document. This third one over here, this one's by the UNESCO, but Competences for Democratic Culture. You can download that for free online. It's by the Council of Europe, and this is basically the Europe's response, I think, to the refugee crisis, to the rise of terrorism, to the rise of populism, and it's kind of describing the competences. Well, as it says, the competences for democratic culture. Okay, basically, what all of these models do, Melina Porta says, is they integrate the pillar of intercultural communicative competence, what we've been trying to do for years, from foreign language education, with the emphasis on civic action in the community from Citizenship Education. Right now, let me show you a couple of examples of how this is working, how it can work. Okay, yeah. The first one again by Melina Porto. This is a fascinating exchange. Melina Porto is a teacher of English, I imagine, in Argentina. And she got her students in Argentina to do a project, 10 minutes, good, okay. Her students in Argentina to do an online project with students in the UK. Now, what does the UK and Argentina have in common? The Falklands. Remember the Falklands War? Okay, all right, okay. And what she did was this. First of all, she got her students to engage online about, what they knew about the war, their experiences of it, their attitudes to what had happened and stuff like that. But then she got the students to go to their local communities and to interview veterans. So people that had taken part in this war and from the Argentinian side and from the British side. They recorded these videos and they shared them together, okay? And in the final stage, and this is where the citizen education side of it will come into it, students became involved in civic action in their local communities. So they actually made leaflets and information about what they had learned, and they distributed it in their local communities. They actually gave local presentations to people outside of the universities about what they had learned and about the different perspectives and stuff like this. So this is the extra bit. This is the global citizenship bit, or the intercultural citizenship bit. Okay, I'll show you another couple of examples before I finish. This is one that I did a couple of years ago between my students and students in France and the students in the UK. This was inspired, I think, by Brexit. Okay, when Brexit happened, and in Spain, all my students were, "Why would you want to leave the European Union? For God's sake, are they mad?" kind of thing, And so I said, okay, well, let's get the Spaniards and the British talking together about what Europe means to them. And we brought in a third country, France, as well, to the mix. We also, all of this, of course, happened through English as a lingua franca, okay? So the students, they did a survey in their local areas about the problems and concerns of young people in Europe, okay? They put all of these findings together, and they came up with one document, okay, where they discussed the differences and things like that. But then they had to write a document together in small teams called Making the European Union More Relevant for Young People. And this final document then was submitted online to the students' representatives in the European Parliament. So we tried to give them in this third final stage the next step. Not only what you're doing together, okay, is just talking about it, but you can actually maybe try and make a difference. So at least they submitted this document then to their politicians that represent them in the European Union. Right? And one final example. The Evaluate project is a project we have at the moment, which is looking at the impact of telecollaboration on future teachers. So I know a lot of you here are you're teacher trainers, right? And what we have done is, last year and this term, we've put together about 35 virtual exchanges. And what these are exchanges between future teachers in, for example, Spain working with Sweden, okay? Or Germany working with Poland, or something like that. They all work through English as a lingua franca. We have American universities taking part as well in this. And they're all doing the same thing, right? This is another example of trying to get, to establish the impact of one model of exchange on lots of different classes to see, what really the impact is, okay? But this again, I think, is an example of citizenship education, because we're getting our students to make things that they can then use in their classes when they become teachers. And these students, we're not positioning them as Spaniards talking to Swedes. We're talking about transnational teams of teachers. The culture we're dealing with is the culture of teaching, all right? So for one example, your group should collaboratively create a learning task for the following scenario. Collaborate with your international partners to design a project for your English class which deals with the issue of refugees in their classrooms. So you've got, for example, there was one of the exchanges that I was involved in was my students in Spain with students in Israel and students in Sweden. And they were working together in small groups of, one Swede, one Spanish, and one Israeli, or two Israeli, 5 minutes, right? And it was just fascinating, because there was never any discussion during the exchanges of the Swedes do it this way, the Israelis do it that way. But they became much more aware of intercultural communication per se, all right? The challenges of working in intercultural teams, right? So that's why I think where we should be going. Examples of what they do, we made a Moodle platform. We thought they'd all want to create, Moodles are, for us older generation, I think the Moodle is like a simple way. Moodle, for example, is like Canvas or Blackboard or whatever it is. It's one of these virtual learning environments, right? But all the students, what did they do? They started using WhatsApp and Google Docs and stuff like that. They refuse to be stuck in these old-fashioned BLEs, right? But let me just finish. This book is like such an old book. I think it's from the 50s, right? The Nature of Prejudice by Gordon Allport, who looked at, he was a social psychologist that looked at the impact of contact in general among cultures. And I think this is my favorite quote of all time. He says, the nub of the matter seems to be that contact must reach below the surface in order to be effective in altering prejudice. Only the type of contact, this is the key, that leads people to do things together is likely to result in changed attitudes. Go back, sorry. It is the cooperative striving for the goals which engenders solidarity. Common participation and common interests are more effective than the bare fact of equal status contact. What is he saying, or what do I take away from this? Stop getting students to say, look, we do this, you do that, fascinating, let's move on. Get your students in these international exchanges to work together to make something together, whether it's a project, a letter to their ministers or their representatives or whatever it is. But get them to make stuff together, because that's really hard. But that's where the real learning will take place. Yeah, look at this, and then I'll finish. Learning outcomes from this Spanish-Swedish-Israeli exchange. I have not learned new language. Okay. So we're not talking about, I've learned the word looking forward to and stuff like that. That doesn't happen anymore. But I have learned to express my ideas more accurately. So there is not any miscommunication. I have also learned to be careful with the way I present my viewpoints and communicate with people from other cultures, because there can be cases when what I say might be misunderstood. So it is necessary to select appropriate language. This is what I'm looking for. I want my students to be aware that the way you say things doesn't mean the same in one culture than in another. Okay, this is the intercultural sensitivity that I'm looking for. So this is intercultural learning, but there's no mention here of Israelis do it like this and Spanish do it like this. Okay, and one more. The main problem in our team was communication. There were some misunderstandings that led us not to trust each other. We solved it by reading again carefully all the messages and answering and asking and answering politely. At the end, we managed to finish our task properly and even enjoy it. Wow. Maybe the online tools for communication were not the best, and I believed that was the origin of our communication problems. And this is where Rick Curran and people like him would say the tool influences the way you communicate, a relational pedagogy about this, okay? But that's another story we don't have time to go in for. I'm going to stop here, but all I would say to you is, if you haven't done these exchanges before, try them, do them. But do them in a critical way. Always evaluate critically your work. Okay, don't think that the way you're going to do it 1 year is going to be the way you will do it the next year. Okay, take a critical approach to it. Okay, and I think the general message I would have for my colleagues that are already researching is, let's listen to the people from the outside who look in from the outside. They're going to criticize it. They won't see it the way we love it. Okay, but that's healthy. That's good, and we should be listening to those people and taking from that. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for rushing so much. All right. Thank you.